Good morning. You listen to FloorDaily.net, and I'm Kemp Harr. This morning, my guest is Don Finkell, who is the CEO of Shaw's Hardwood business. Don, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Kemp. How are you doing?
Great. Good to be with you. I always like talking to you. You're kind of recognized as the godfather of the hardwood business. You're intelligent. You've got your finger on the pulse of a lot of issues. Just for the background, most people know you were the CEO of Anderson when it was a private company. When Shaw bought it, you became the head of that whole business. And you've been involved in, the introduction of aluminum oxide finishes, the movement toward engineered flooring, a lot of the huge innovations that have really moved this business along. And I always like talking to you. Talk a little bit first. You've been at this show. You obviously travel around the world. What are some of the trends we're seeing in the hardwood business?
Well, I think one of the trends that we're seeing is that business is better. This is the first NWFA show in 4 years that's been sold out, which is, I think, very positive for the industry. It speaks to an improving economic climate, and I think also the transition of management from Ed Korzak to Michael Martin and NWFA, I think, has been positive going forward. And Michael and his team, have a lot of creativity and pizzazz. I tend to think in terms of style and design with wood floors. I think that, you're seeing wider, longer, more rustic, more character, kind of reclaimed, lower gloss finishes, more grays and neutrals. I'll call them neutrals, not so much natural. We don't see a lot of natural, but we see a neutral. People will look at it and think that it's natural, but to us in the wood finishing business, we know that it's actually got some things on it that make it not look like natural wood, so that it becomes kind of a neutral canvas on which the rest of the interior design is built. You see a lot of this influence in Europe. I've always looked to Europe for trends, and you see them become mainstream in the U.S., a few years later. And I think that's still happening.
Let me just add real quick, one of the reasons you have quite a design eye is many people may not know that you're actually an architectural grad from the University of Tennessee. You look at that side of it. Let me ask you, one of the things I'm noticing, and tell me if I'm correct here, but I'm seeing somehow they're accentuating the grain so that there's much more contrast in certain products. That's kind of a new look, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they call that cerusing. I'm not sure if that's exactly the right way to say it, but it's putting one color in the grain and having another color on the flake. We've done that at Anderson, for some time to one degree or another. In Europe, you have a lot of oil finishes, and the oils have pigments in them, and you can get that down into the grain more, so it accentuates the grain. And you can have different techniques where you can wire brush it and put on a color and then sand it off, and that will give you one color in the grain. And then when you restain it, that's primarily on the flake. So you see a lot of that being done, and I think that's becoming a stronger and stronger trend.
Well, the hardwood business in the U.S. has been impacted certainly by the depression of the housing market. Talk a little bit. You just mentioned Europe. I know you go to Asia. As a matter of fact, our last interview was about you opening a retail store in China. Now, talk a little bit about the penetration of hardwood in the U.S. versus what you see in other countries.
Well, I think actually the penetration of hardwood in the U.S. is much lower than other places. In Europe, I think it's probably twice the percentage of all floor covering, just because I guess it's a more mature market. You have more remodeling there. You don't have as much new home construction. In China, it's even greater than that. China, you really have very little carpet because of the quality of the carpet in China historically has not been very good, and it's kind of gotten a bad name. You also have a lot of environmental pollution there, and it gets tracked in, and so people are more conscious about the cleanability of it. But wood is, maybe 30% of the market in China, and the rest is laminate and ceramic tile. A lot of ceramic tile in China.
All right, let's talk about the opportunities for growth in this wood category in the U.S. Take, for instance, I know based on listening to your daughter, Allie did a wonderful presentation around how to sell hardwood to the A&D community. Talk about opportunities for growth.
Well, I think the commercial market, hardwood, both in commercial and residential, it is a look or an aesthetic that consumers prefer. If you ask them if they could have anything that they wanted, if price was not an option, if maintenance was not an option, what would they want? And by and far, most of them would like wood. So there is the desire there for wood. I think things that keep them from using it in the commercial market, a lot of it has to do with maintenance. Wood is not going to hold up like ceramic tile or high-quality commercial carpet in a high-traffic area. So if you can advance those kind of performance attributes of the product, I think you'll see an opportunity for more wood being used in commercial. Residential, I still think as the population ages, the demographics, the baby boomer generation, which we're members of, as people get older and the kids leave home, they tend to decide that it's time to spend money on me, and they like granite countertops and they like hardwood floors. So I think that you will see a natural increase in the hardwood market in the U.S. just because of the aging demographic of the population.
You've actually just answered another question I had. When I look at Santo Torsivia's reports, they go on out into 2016. It looks like that hardwood is really going to ramp up and take off, and not just grow in proportion to other categories, but actually take share versus other categories. And you think that that's somewhat going to be driven by a demographic and by people finally deciding to spend on a few luxury items?
Yeah, I think that it's what women prefer as they get older and as they take care of their kids. It becomes time for me, and so I think they'll spend money on things that they've always wanted and for whatever reason either couldn't afford or were afraid that it would get ruined by the hustle and bustle of their household. So I think wood will grow in that aspect. I also think the technology of making wood is getting better, and one of the things that I've learned being at Shaw, there's a great engineering staff there, and they really are good at trying to figure out ways to make wood more competitively without giving up the nice qualities of wood.
You talk about the performance in the commercial market. We've seen some companies who have come out with an epoxy infusion and things like that. Do you think that there will be some type of finish that will come out that will improve the performance of wood in the commercial market?
Well, certainly that's kind of the holy grail, of wood R&D, and we're looking for that finish all the time. You've had chemically impregnated wood for a long time in the commercial market where you put, a hardener and a color into the wood. So I think there's some things around that could be innovative that would improve the performance in a commercial situation.
One last topic I want to talk to you, this whole understanding around the green attributes of wood. There's been this whole terrible word out there of deforestation. I know I've covered this topic with you before, but in the U.S., I think it's interesting to point out that there is more inventory of hardwood out there in the forest than there's ever has been. Is that right?
Well, I don't think it's more than it's ever has been, but since it's been colonized by Europeans, there's more now. 1 trillion board feet of inventory of hardwoods in America, I think, which is what Mark Barford said from the NHLA, and I support that. It all comes from the U.S. Forest Service. So we have a great hardwood resource here in the U.S. It's legal. It's sustainable, and it's being recognized around the world now, and a lot of that has to do with the Lacey Act. You do have deforestation in other parts of the world, mostly in the tropics, tropical deforestation, which does have negative consequences on the environment, with global warming. I don't know if it has anything to do with no azaleas at the Masters, but I do believe that you have, some impact there, and a lot of that has to do with just not as many trees in the world. The other thing, as you get more and more people in the world, everybody has to eat, and there's a lot of forest being cut down, especially in the tropics, to grow food. So a lot of that has, kind of negative implications for the tropical forest of the world.
All right, Don, it's great to talk to you. Again, we've been talking with Don Finkell, who is the CEO of Hardwood for Shaw Industries, and you've been listening to Kemp Harr and FloorDaily.net.